And we are live, I think. Today we are on Fireside Chat number 56. Tech layoffs. What's the resolution? Right? This is the topic for today. For those of you that don't know us, I'm here together with Sandro and Matt, co-founders of Codurance. I'm managing director, and this is basically an extension of what used to be uh, chats that we have after hours after work, usually with a drink. That at some point we decide, okay, well, so some of this stuff is interesting. Maybe other people would like to um, be involved in the discussion. So if you have questions while we are exploring this topic and so on, don't hesitate to shoot them in the chat, either in YouTube, LinkedIn, whatever you are. If you like what you're seeing, like, subscribe, hit the notification icon. And without further ado, today's topic. And today's topic is triggered by something quite, I would say, unusual that happened recently. So, of course, we get offered services for hiring and recruiting people, no, and this is or subcontracting. Some consultancies come to us and say, hey, would you like to partner? We have this type of developer, whatever. But the other day, I got a call from a recruitment agency that had been tasked with placing people that were about to be laid off. So a company in Spain was getting rid of 100 and something developers, and they were basically trying to find a new home for these people, no, or new homes for these people. And I thought that was quite interesting. First, because it wasn't it was the first time that I seen this, right? That people without being fired, they were already being kind of placed or trying to figure out, which I think it's a very humane thing to do. Now, if you're a company very conscious, no, of you as a company, but also because this whole thing in the news about Amazon laying off people, Microsoft laying off, like everyone's basically seems to be firing people now because of the recession. Uh, Seems like it's finally getting to Europe and to Spain in particular. So, you know, let's open up the topic. What is happening? Why do we think there are so many layoffs happening, and what's this all about?
You can go first, Mesh.
Um, I think one is that the layoffs are. I mean, there are a bunch of reasons for it. I think one reason is that during the pandemic, the tech sector actually took off rather than slow down massively, especially things like Zoom and Twitter and all these things. And remote working and all, and there was a massive hiring spree in the tech sector. So that's one thing. Uh, the other thing I would say is that I know that companies go through certain cycles, and when the big ones go through these cycles, they tend to follow each other, because if Google's doing it, and Twitter is doing it, and Microsoft doing it, and then I guess the shareholders or owners start asking, why aren't you doing it? It's sometimes it's almost like uh, everyone they're following a pattern within the industry to make sure that they are on that side. There is, of course, rationalization. After every peak, after every high, there's a low. So the part of it is that as well. Um, the other thing I would like to frame that is that tech layoffs don't necessarily mean software developers or software development professionals, like product owners and people involved in kind of what we do. I think it covers a wide variety of professions and roles. They just happen to be in
Yeah,
tech.
I doubt that the 10,000 that Amazon laid off, they're all developers. That's probably not the case,
That's
right? Like there
most
might be
likely.
some tech people in there, but Amazon has lots of fulfillment centers everywhere, right? So
Yeah.
most
Yeah,
likely.
I think that in Amazon's case, again, I don't have all the stats, but like if I'm not wrong, in Amazon's case, there were a lot of people from Amazon that there were more from the stores that they have and warehouse and other things like that. but not necessarily only developers. Like I don't, yeah, it was not the vast majority. It's just because it happens to be a tech company,
Hmm.
but yeah,
Yeah.
not necessarily technical people.
Yeah, and I think there is another element. It's to do with the pattern. It's like what are the markets looking for? Something they're looking for growth. It's just the mood of the market, and sometimes they're looking for profitability. And it seems to be the market's mood is going more towards profitability. And when that happens, businesses try to lean up, and try to trim the fat, as it were. I know it's a horrible way of saying it, but that's also, I think, there is a bit for mood. There is a uh, bit for doom and gloom. I don't think it's that much warranted. I know that there are certain things that are causing the economies to shrink, but not, especially not software development. I think software development is, when I was doing some reading, and I was for this actually, and I was looking at software development expenditure is looking to increase by I don't know, like 10% or something this year. That is,
A bit
you
less
know,
than that from what I remember, like Gartner saying that it's a bit less. Like there is an increase in expenditure, but I think it's like, I don't remember exactly, 2-3%. It's a smaller increase, but it's still an increase.
it's yeah. So I
Still
mean, depends where
growth.
what you read and how they qualify it. Like, because they were saying software is 10, and then IT services is 6 in one place, and yeah, but they tend to kind of widely vary. But as I said, like, no one is saying that it's going to decrease. So that's the other side of things. So yeah, I think it's easy to just say, oh, tech sector, all software development type work, but I don't think so. Yeah.
Yeah, so for me, like again, of course, that at this point, I don't think that anyone knows precisely what's the reason, and I doubt that there is a single cause. For me, it's a combination of factors. I believe that, although I don't like to blame external factors, like external factors for me is the last thing that I'm going to start thinking about. But there is, we come from those last 3 years, they were very complicated. So we went from the whole pandemic thing, like from in a matter of a few weeks, the whole world changed. And then a lot of business models had to adapt. And a lot of IT companies, they thrived, right? Because as soon as there is like a big change in the economy, in order to for companies to keep themselves alive, they need to reinvent themselves. And quite often, like in order to do that, they need to change software. They need to change a lot of things in their IT, let's say, to reinvent themselves. So a lot of new opportunities were created, although some companies died, but a lot of other companies created, as you mentioned, Mesh, like all those video call tools and Miro and telemedicine, right? So delivery companies, so all of that kind of online shopping. So those things, although they existed in there, they were massively accelerated during the pandemic. So a new range of new businesses were created, and a lot of companies were betting on those new norm, right? So and for that, they do what companies do. They invest. They say, look, I think that this is an opportunity here, so let's invest, let's hire some people, let's put some money, let's try to create this product, and so on and so forth. The pandemic kind of uh didn't exactly go away, but we are, so in a space of 3 years, we are going back to normal. A lot of companies are going back to their offices and things like that. And then we also had a war. So we're still having a war. So I think that there are quite significant economical factors that will. It's not very easy for you to create business plans or to create a business strategy when there are so many significant changes in the economy and the ways that we even live as a society. So I mean, so there are. I would not. I think that there are external factors. As I said, I don't like to blame external factors normally for how companies do business, but I think that they were significantly enough for us to acknowledge that they had an impact.
There is a question from Jennifer. Hi, Jennifer. My experience from Sweden and UK is that many times big companies such as banks prefer to lay off employees, then rehire them as contractors, freelancers to avoid permanent employee benefits. My personal view is for any business, that's a very risky strategy, and I'm sure some do it, but good people will leave. So normally, if you have some good talent, a lot of that talent will leave if you do something like this. Especially, if you as soon as you start saying layoffs, people start looking,
Yeah.
and that's a big risk. So so people who don't, and I'm sure there are businesses that don't value their people and the talent that they have. It's a very risky thing to do, and a bad business in my view.
Yeah, and Jennifer, like I don't know, as you said, you are relating, you are sharing your experience with us, and one thing I know, because like we worked for a lot of large companies in the past as permanent employees, and also providing service to them. Most large organizations, they will always have like, by as part of their growth strategy, to keep a percentage of permanent employees, but always work. Normally, they talk about 30%. That is kind of those large banks that you are referring to, because we worked for a bank before Codurance, Mesh and I. And they like working with these 30%, around 30% of external people, either contractors or consultancy companies and so on. Because these, although they pay more in theory for those people, but allows them to reduce or to reduce cost if something happens. It's almost like a way for them to keep some safety in their business when something really serious happens. In terms of, but what you are reporting is like when they lay off permanent employees and try to rehire them as contractors or I'm not
Which
sure
by
how
law, I'm not
legal
so
this
sure that
is.
that can be. Yeah, by law, at least in Spain, I'm not
Yeah,
so sure that that can be done. In fact, if you're a
exactly.
contractor, you should have more than one employer. Otherwise, the law thinks that basically it's an employee. If you only work for one
Yeah,
company, then it's probably a company employee, right?
yeah.
That's the
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
that
a lot
that
of
can get the
countries are
company
like,
in trouble. Even in the UK, that will get the company in trouble. Yeah, for doing
yeah.
that.
So in UK we have a law as well, like it's called IR35. I don't know if I can call it a law, but it is a
Yeah.
similar thing. You cannot have someone as a contractor if they only work for a single company.
There are some
So
ways of getting around it, but the tax uh, person looks at it in a
yeah.
very
Mhm.
they take very dim view of it. If, for example, the pattern is that someone just left the company and then were rehired as a contractor, that is tax avoidance, and they do,
Mhm.
do take a very dim view of it. So
Mm.
businesses that are engaging in that kind of thing could fall foul of the of HMRC in the UK at least. Yeah.
So yeah, as I was saying, for example, I survived. Well, not survived, but I went through, and I think that you as well, Mesh. Like quite a few of us that we've been in the industry for quite a while, and we went through the credit crunch, like 2008, 9, or 10, around that time. I was made redundant at that time. Um, so again, like when there are those economical uncertainties, a lot of companies will try to uh, reduce the level of investment that they make, and they will start cutting the things that are not so strategic, right? So they tend to be a bit more conservative in their investments. And a lot of companies, mainly large organizations, they have a lot of irons on the fire, as you say, Mesh, right? So they normally have, like, they have their core businesses, but they are always trying a lot of different things. They always have different experiments, different product lines, different services that they're trying to invest. And those investments, they sometimes take a long time to have a return, and sometimes they never materialize, and they will kill them eventually. Um, but when the economical situation becomes very uncertain, their appetite to keep investing on business lines that are not immediately giving them a return, it's probably one of the areas that they're going to cut
I'm
first.
gonna I'm gonna try to go in a different direction now with this because yes, there are the macro factors. Yeah, there are certain strategies, that business use in this sense. Um, I feel like there's another aspect, which is the demand, in particular for software development, yeah, that has played a factor in that, because the salaries have gone up as well quite a bit for the industry in general, right? So I think that that has also contributed to that aspect, like, because there aren't that many people available with the skills, companies are competing in salaries, that tends to drive up the salaries, but that does not mean that it's sustainable for a business to be paying those salaries, right? So this is also a way for companies to self-regulate before they go into, they default, or they don't they go into a bigger problem, right? Like, people say, no, they're doing these layoffs, and there isn't really a problem behind it, no, like the company's still making earnings, or like still earning or whatever. Yeah, that is in part because they did the layoffs, right? So in a way, it's a bit of a balancing act, no, between the situation in the market and the sustainability of the business, as well, no.
Mhm.
What do you think? Because I may be
I think
wrong.
I think it's a very, very, very good point. Very good point. Because a lot of times when we talk about layoffs and we talk about, I mean, like sinister ploys from the company to get rid of people, and that is also possible. But if you companies if they're laying off people, one thing is that there could be politics as well, but primarily it's a, as you said, it's an exercise in creating a more sustainable business, right? Often it can be, right? And if the salaries increase and the cost increases with the number of people, it might be that they don't have the same appetite in terms of whatever they want to produce, and they might prioritize, and they might trim their own ambitions, and consequently try to then trim the the workforce that they have as well. I think it's a very good point. Yeah.
There's another aspect that I would talk about as well, which is, you mentioned cycles, right? And it's very well known, this bringing in internally, no, or internalizing IT and then externalizing IT. That's something that's been going on for a very long time, right? Like, we hire our own IT department, blah blah blah. They grow massively, and then at some point, oh no, we take this out, either put it, like, either fire these people, or turn it into a separate company, and they need to be their own profit center, and we don't, they just give us a service, right? And they should do a good job, otherwise we're going to find someone else to do to do the job for them, no. And I think that cycle of going in and out, no, or bringing the function in and out, is also a factor here, no, like. And to some extent, when we think about this, if we are in a shrinking, externalized kind of mode, yeah, this is good for consultancies, because they're basically the ones that are going to be picking up the no the work that is left, right? So that is in itself, good, no, for us at least, or our type of work. um and I think that's also a factor in that, no, that cyclical nature of how things are supposed to go. And because do you think the demand has been reduced?
So I'm still not sure. I'm still not sure because like the I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's been reduced, but it may have changed. So in term when it comes to, because there is a difference. For example, the pandemic was a very different effect than an economical crisis, right? In my view, they are very different. The pandemic was like companies had to reinvent. So new businesses were created. They had to pivot their businesses. So there was a demand in terms of, hey, we need to invest more and we need to be creative in there. And there was that hiring spree. When you look at all all the news about the layoffs, the big tech layoff, and we saw everywhere, including our company, like most companies that we know, not only in the US but in the UK, in Spain, and stuff. As soon as there was a pandemic and remote became a thing, companies start hiring and say, look, you know what? Now we have access to a worldwide pool, right? So the barriers were really removed, and they were reinventing themselves. So there was a lot of investment. An economical crisis brings a different challenge because there is not a change in lifestyle. There's not a change in how people behave or how they buy or how they sell and stuff. No, there is a constraint. There is more of a constraint. For example, we are not now locked at our homes now without being able to go to a shop, right? So what there is now is people a bit more concerned or more conservative in how they spend their money.
But that also
So
changes habits. So there
it
is a
changed a
habit
bit,
change.
but,
Yeah.
but but it's a smaller change. Of course, it does, but it's a smaller change than what
It's less
happened.
disruptive, you'd say. No,
Far
it's
less. But what I'm trying to say is that in economical crisis, the demand for I don't think that the demand necessarily reduces, but the type of demand changes. For example, I know a lot of companies now that are talking about initiatives to cut costs, to accelerate their automation of processes. So a lot of initiatives that they never had the time to do, for example, in the past, now they accelerate and say, you know what, there is an economical crisis. Why don't we try to optimize that? Let's start opening more and more initiatives to reduce cost, to optimize the process and stuff like that. So that doesn't necessarily remove work from developers or people in platform engineering and stuff, but they are trying to become leaner as companies.
You know, one thing I would say is that when we talk about economic crisis, this is a different one because this is a crisis in terms of cost of living, right? Uh, Tech sector jobs, especially software development jobs, always been one of the highest paying jobs. And although a lot of people are asking for, kind of to go to for their jobs to rise with inflation, I think other jobs are rising more than the tech sector jobs to some extent. Tech sector jobs are also rising, but in terms of percentage, probably not the same level because I think tech sector people don't feel the pinch as as bad as a lot of other. And so there is an element of that as well, that the jobs are. So the economic crisis that we talk about, I think it's important to say that it's not an economic crisis in terms of unemployment, let's say, right? Because like unemployment, for example, has been the in the UK, it's been we are currently going through some of the lowest unemployment rates,
I
for
think
a
that is
very
the
long
same
time.
in the US. I don't have the date in front of me, but what I remember seeing when reading some of the layoffs, I think that is the same for the US as well. They have a lower unemployment rate.
Yeah, yeah. So unemployment is going is fairly low. So it's a different kind of economic crisis as well. That we are talking about jobs and job layoffs and so on, but the unemployment is fairly low. And then so it, I'm not sure if there is I think there is some tech sectors are leaning up, but I'm not sure how much of this is hype and how much of this is reality. I mean, even if you talk about 20,000 jobs at Google or Microsoft across the world, right? It's still very small fry compared to the full kind of employment market of the world or different countries, right?
Yeah,
It's
it is.
it's a very small fraction, I would say.
And even percentage wise is also quite small for them as well,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So when you look at but there are but I still believe, for example, I feel even like last year we were talking about that that there was some sort of a bubble as well in the tech industry, and that was triggered by the all the remote work and stuff, because like the remote work, they started being calibrated according to the large cities, right? So for example, a lot of people were being hired as remote first, but their salaries, if they were hired as remote first before the pandemic, the difference between someone going to the office 5 days a week would be much larger. With the pandemic, what happened is the remote work, the salaries moved up closer to the ones working in the cities,
And
right?
regional differences as well. I mean, we saw that, like, we have an office
In-
in Manchester and London. There was a much bigger difference. Now it's almost negligible,
yeah,
right, in terms
exactly.
of salaries for the kind of hybrid contracts.
And this is not sustainable. So, for example, we were discussing that already last year, even before all those layoffs, that there would be at some point, there would be like almost like a bubble bursting kind of effect, because like there was at some point you cannot hire like the ratio that salaries increased for IT professionals. They were way different from most of the other ones in terms of percentage. Mainly for people, for example, platform engineers. There were a lot of appealing, for example, a lot of companies investing in new technologies, mainly in the cloud and stuff. Those salaries skyrocketed in the past few years. Right. So and then it reached a point that as companies start hiring, because they have ideas, they want to invest in new businesses, new opportunities and stuff. And when they don't materialize, now they have a very expensive workforce for business initiatives that are not bringing that result and are being pushed with all these economical external factors, and they will need to do something about it, right? So I think that there is a combination of those factors in
Let
mind.
me add another one in there, because there is an aspect of companies not being able to tell whether someone is, because we talked about the salaries, right? And salaries going up, and if you're really good at your job, you should be rewarded for that, no? Uh, but what happened as well was there were lots of initiatives to try to provide uh, supply that demand, yeah, with all the boot camps and the quick kind of ways to get people on the job market. And of course, the quality of someone that comes out of a boot camp compared to someone who's studied maybe for 5 years or whatever, right? It's or maybe has more years of experience or whatever, it's very different, right? However, the expectations on the salaries were more or less the same. Like I
Yeah,
remember interviewing people
yeah.
who just kept, they've been developing maybe for 6 months, no, and they're expecting to get 30 here in Spain, right? But
Mhm.
35K salary, yeah, which would normally be a good salary before all of this started happening, no? So that kind of thing, I think, is there's also been a readjustment, no, of going back to the we can't really afford it, because if there's no one, yeah, and you're competing in salary, then you pay a lot, but you're not very certain of the quality that you're getting. And by the way, this you can do your hiring process and all this stuff, but in the end there's only so much that you can try there, especially if there's a lot of competition. You have a pressure to make it as tight and concrete as possible. No, like if I can hire you in one interview, that would be better than if I do five, or whatever. And all of that comes with a price as well. No, so some people may come in that don't necessarily have the skills, but you're still, you know, paying good salaries, etc., etc. So again, there is a lot in there that happened during that rapid growth, no, that I think is now self kind of regulating.
I agree with the, of course, that this take us like, in which I probably not a good idea to go there, but there are different political philosophies or economical philosophies that is the market will regulate itself, and it will sometimes go in, becomes more, for example, we were in a developers market, and that goes up to a point that no one can afford anyone, like cannot afford to hire so many developers anymore, and then people start saying, look, this is not working, let's reduce our capacity and just try to automate more and more processes, or become leaner, or not invest in new initiatives, just stick to our core business. And then all of a sudden you have more people available, and that regulates itself again, because then it becomes like an employer's market and not an employee market. So and that
I
tends to
think I think there will be a long time indeed before the software development market becomes an employer's market to
Hmm,
some level, because the
true.
software development is still has, and I'm not talking about just programmers and so on. I'm talking about professionals within that whole sector. The opportunities are constantly increasing because we have more and more businesses are still, there is still a lot of pent up demand for this kind of work, right? And I think at some point it will probably flatline. I'm not sure if we are there yet.
I wouldn't say that it would flip. Maybe like I was just trying to make a point, but it will probably not be so. The discrepancy might not be so strong as it
I
was.
see. Yeah, it would be,
Mm.
yeah, it would come. It's definitely kind of cooling off
Yeah.
to some level, right? But I don't know. Who knows? There might
and
be another some
and I think
other.
companies are also learning to discern better what it is that they're looking for and so on. And I've seen this. Of course, this is anecdotal, no, but lots of people who, for instance, came out of boot camps, and now the storytelling now is it's hard to find a job after you do this, right?
Mhm.
Because companies are not so willing to take in more people without experience or whatever. So there are certain changes in behavior also in companies and how they decide to invest, no, in that workforce that are happening as well, no. And you have, I don't know, uh, here in Spain, Boxer Group, Sara, there's bunch of companies that are already creating their own academy programs or their own excellence center or whatever. No, they're or their scholarships in some cases. No, kind of like, hey, I'll just pay for your training for X amount of time, and then so this approach may be also a response to that. No, instead of just continuing to hire at the same rate or
And yeah, and there is more as well. For example, one thing that we are seeing more and more. I don't know how it is in Spain, Jose. It would be good to get your perspective. But for example, in UK, more and more we are coming across companies that are working in their office a few days a week, and we are going back to some demands from clients. For example, we already have a client in the UK that they want their people, and include our people, to be in their office 3 times a week. My wife goes to the office twice a week. I just spoke to a company today, and they would have a very big preference. They made it quite clear that they would have a preference to have people that are in the same city where they are. Like in this case, I was in Manchester earlier today for a meeting, and that client said, "Look, I would love to have your people co-located with us, and we come to the office twice a week." So if we have some people in the UK, it will be good as well. So they because London and Manchester is just a 2.5 hour train drive, so that will not be a big deal. Uh, but for example, so that thing about being collocated, a lot of companies are going back to say, look, we are missing that now after 3 years. We know how more productive we were, how that sense of identity. So this will probably also rebalance a bit the job market.
Mhm. There is actually a very interesting comment from Jennifer. I think part of the solution is for the senior management to try to balance the organic growth of the company. I look at steady growth, but not committing to too many new customers too fast, as it could be project specific. And once the projects are over, the clients don't want to renew the contracts. When I was reading something, I think there was a TikTok video or something, and this person said layoffs are always the management's fault. And yeah, I would agree that and it's not that we've not made certain those kind of mistakes ourselves as well, but overextending, and then kind of trying to and realizing that you overextended and then try to lay off. Laying off people is always a very traumatic experience for any
Yeah,
business. It's
yeah.
it's not something that you do lightly. uh, I don't know what business would, but I mean, we run a business, and We don't think that like this would be the last option because it creates trauma in the organization, and actually as a consequence, the people that you definitely don't want to leave end up leaving as well.
Exactly.
So they are a very traumatic thing. The other thing is the organic growth, and how quickly you grow. I think that thing is very easy to say and very difficult to do, because in hindsight it's very easy to look at it and say, oh, you shouldn't have overextended. Of course it's easy to look at which point you overextended, but every business as they try to grow, and growth is an aspect of the business, right? Growth creates stability. There's many reasons. A lot of the times when people talk, stay small, stay sustainable, I know certain kind of businesses can do that, but sustainability, the way our economic markets are set up, is that the GDP as measured by percentage increase. When you are flatlined, you are almost in recession. You are at the tip of the recession. So this kind of standing in place or being where you are and being sustainable from a business perspective, actually is very rare that that's the case when you're standing still. So businesses do need to grow. What happens usually is that getting gauging that growth is not easy, because actually what can happen is that if you're not meeting demand, you can shrink, because markets start understanding that you are unable to meet demand, and you can start shrinking as well. So it's very easy to say from a hindsight perspective how grow organically. I personally think no business would say to you, oh, we grew really fast, we shouldn't have because of greed or whatever else. I think a lot of the times businesses are looking at demand and they think actually it's sustainable for us to grow. There is of course risks involved with the growth, and sometimes they don't pay off, but I think it's a
But
very
there's a
difficult thing to gauge in terms of how far stretched you are at any point.
but there is another point that she's making in her comment that is related to companies that hire people for specific jobs, and then for whatever reason that client doesn't continue or whatever, no, and then there is no demand whatsoever, no, and this is kind of important because especially for consultancies, no, and we always say this, we don't hire people for a particular project, we hire
Mhm.
good people that we want to work with, no,
Exactly.
and then the projects will come after that, no.
Mhm.
um but this idea of, oh, we have this project, let's hire someone to do this particular job, it is a dangerous
Oh yeah.
proposition, right? Like
Yeah.
especially when your business is the, when your business is the body shopping kind of business, right? And you have no regards for people, no, and then it's okay, the project didn't continue, I cannot place this person, you know you can lay them off, no.
Yeah.
But that's again
Well,
a
that is
pretty
the
inhumane, it's very transactional, and
Yeah.
it's very
make financial sense, no. But it's not, definitely not very humane in that sense.
it only makes financial sense. And yes, a lot of companies get big doing that. And sorry, one thing I do mean to say is, like, I have a context in mind, which is our context, right?
Yeah.
We are not growing for like, we're not in the margins game. This kind of thing where body shopping and hiring people for projects and this kind of thing, this is a margins game where you're competing on price, and you're going as low, like low as possible, so you're trying to reduce your costs as much as possible, and also so that you can reduce your rate as much as possible. So you kind of going low, right? You're competing on price and price alone, right? And there are businesses that do that, but that's in a way, one can say is a false economy. But there are certain businesses who manage to do that pretty well. But
So
that's not what we are. For example, we are not competing on that. We are competing on the quality of our work, and in order to do that, you have to invest in the people. You have to hire the people for their skill, and not because they fit that project, because that just would not work.
yeah, I think that for example, there is a lot of interesting things that Jennifer is mentioning in her comments. Jennifer, thank you very much, actually, for sharing your experience and also putting your uh, opinions in there, because it really helps us to shape this conversation. And so for example, Jennifer was saying that so it's better to have slower growth, keeping the employees and clients happy, rather than having a quick win with a couple of projects with the new clients and hiring new employees. So this is true. But this is what Mash was saying. So one thing that is important for people to understand, for example, I never had a business. Codurance is my first business, right? So for example, one thing that I never understood is uh, you cannot have a business that just keeps straight, going on a straight line. The market will always have a force to make your business reduce. So for example, employees at some point they will find other opportunities, or they want to do other things, or they had a change of heart, or they want to move to another country. So for example, you will always lose some people for different reasons. Clients, the same thing, right? So they work with other companies until it's interesting for them.
And also you don't know when that's going to happen, right?
Exactly,
Sometimes you can tell, but
exactly. So
sometimes you
sometimes you
can't.
wake up
Someone just
and,
shows up and
and
says, hey, this
exactly.
is, I'm giving you
So
notice, whatever.
this is very important for people that don't own a business to understand, is that sometimes you wake up in the morning and then there is a resignation in your inbox, or you go to a normal regular meeting with your clients that you do every 2 weeks, and all of a sudden they give you notice because something happened in their organization, right? So all of a sudden, so you as a business owner or someone that manages a business, you cannot be complacent. So because the forces will always push your business down. If you do nothing, your business will collapse, right? So that's always, so we always need to be making a force for your business to grow, to keep it at least at the same level, right? So the interesting thing is to calibrate that, because if you keep your business too small, it's one or two people that leave your business, or one or two clients that for whatever reason decide not to work with you, and that might or might not be your fault, your business can crash, and then everyone in that business will be gone, right? So as Mash was saying, so growing your business and creating multiple opportunities and reducing the key dependency on employees is what provides safety to a lot of people working in that business.
Employees and clients, and part of that
Exactly.
is growth. When you have 5 people, and those 5 people are working in one client, how are you going to diversify that? How are you going to make sure that whatever split you have is going to be able to hold the everyone's salaries, and if one of the clients disappears, it's a numbers game as well, right? The more the bigger the business is, the more clients you can serve, the less weight each client has in your portfolio, unless you don't pay attention to that, and then deliberately, suddenly one client becomes 90% of your revenue. Then you're
Yeah.
probably doing something wrong, like you're taking on more risk. But then that's a decision that you're making, right? It's not something that that you can't it is something that you can avoid, but you're choosing not to, or not to pay attention to.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that's also a factor, no, like how you decide to manage that risk of someone saying that they're leaving, or of a client saying that they're not going to work with you. And part of that goes through having more capacity and being able to do sometimes more than one thing, no, with the even with the same people. Sometimes it's about having a bit of slack, no, people that are available. So if something comes up, then either whether it's growth or it is some risk that you need to mitigate, you can delegate that capacity to mitigate that risk.
Mm. There is another element to this as well. So, for example, besides the employees and clients, volatility, if you like. So that's why you need to have your business to a certain size, so that clients and individuals would not have a significant impact in the rest of the organization, the market is evolving as well. So there are new trends. Your competitors are offering new services. Your clients are becoming also more demanding as things evolve. So companies, in order to keep, sometimes just to keep the status quo, they need to be investing in new initiatives, in new technologies, in new products, just to keep it current. And some of those investments will not materialize. They will not survive. So companies are in this constant evolution, knowing that some of those initiatives, if you like, they will not materialize as the thing for the future of the company, but they will need to do those things. And then if the company is stable, is healthy financially, they can take those people that were very creative, very good in what they do, but sometimes the business idea was not, is where things didn't go well, and then you can redirect that group of people to work in a different initiative, either in one of the core initiatives of the company or in a new initiative, a new product, a new experiment, and things like that. But if the situation of the financial situation of the company is constrained, you will not have that flexibility to try to create all those or those initiatives, for example. And that's where you start cutting, not from your core business.
This is actually a very interesting point, isn't it? Because like there is the growth aspect, which is, you're seeing demand grow and you kind of trying to grow alongside the demand. There is a kind of unbounded ambition as well, right? So if like you look at a lot of these larger companies, like Google and Microsoft and Twitter and so on, like when the money really starts flowing, and I'm not just talking about revenue, I'm just talking about investment money, right? The sometimes ambitions start becoming unbounded as well. And so there is this kind of like supply demand, whether you call it organic growth or not, it's it's perspective. But there is this kind of ambition that you have a lot of money, you have a lot to burn, and suddenly it
Yeah,
creates this
this
dynamic.
is yeah. That's a very good point, and it could even give make way, for useless jobs, or even not useless, but people who get hired and now suddenly they need to justify that they are hired. Yeah. So then
Y-
they start creating this work, that may
yeah.
not be that necessary or really contribute very very little. And this is where things like, people were amazed that Twitter was still working after firing 3,000 employees and basically halving or more the whole employee count or the head count. You need to ask yourself. I mean, there's probably people that were doing very good job and they still got fired and all that stuff. But you need to
It's
wonder,
not, but it's
how
not
much of
about.
that was really essential for the business. How much
Exactly.
of that
And
was,
but this is,
mm,
I think, a management
fluff.
problem, not a people problem, because regardless of who you hire, uh, and you can hire really really talented people, but if there's too many people, they're all producing, right? Like if you got a team of 5 versus a team of 50, and the work was for 5 people, those 50 people, they're all going to produce, right? And what's going to happen is that, and they all think that they're doing, uh, they're kind of contributing. So no one
Well,
produces without thinking
you will
they're
hope that, no, that people
yeah.
do want to do their jobs.
Exactly.
No, they're
But
not
what you
just
do is this, because
will.
there are more people producing, the scope naturally starts increasing, and you lose focus because they're all producing, they're creating features, they're writing code, they're creating backlogs, they're, designing screens, they're doing analysis, all sorts of things, but more and more. And because there's more that can be done, suddenly the focus kind of target starts getting bigger and bigger and bigger, right? So then you start losing focus, and in itself can be a very bad thing for a business. But what happens is that, you had this much money to burn, you hired this many people thinking more people are always a good thing, and they're going to do what they have been hired to do. They're going to produce, and then, and suddenly when like the brakes are put on and you run out of money, right, you're going to start losing people. And one is as good as the other in some ways, because when the focus is no longer there, that's when you start then create arbitrary focus, and then whoever are the lucky ones who fall into that little circle remain, and the others are left. And I think this is irresponsible kind of management. This is like irresponsible business, basically.
Yeah, so I will bring a counterpoint that might not be so popular, right? Because like but I think that is important to no, I think that is important to do a counterpoint because, for example, I don't. Someone shared on Twitter in one of our threads that we would be talking about this topic, a comment from a guy that used to be the global HR for Microsoft, and he's just blaming management for all the layoffs and stuff, right? And I felt that it was a very cheap uh, thing to do because everything in the company can be the senior management responsibility. Everything that happens in there, including the creation of thousands and thousands and thousands of jobs. Because, like, for example, it's easy to blame the people, the managers that, for example, okay, so Microsoft, I don't know, laid off, I don't know exactly how many thousands, but those many thousands were like, I don't know, a small percentage of the entire population of employees. That entire population didn't even exist if it was not also the management initiatives to try new products, try new initiatives, invest the money, try new things. And those things that they succeed, they increase, they created more and more jobs. And not, yes, they made mistakes. They might have overreached. Some of them, I would even say, as you said, Mash, that, and I think that Jennifer allured to that as well, that sometimes they were a bit irresponsible. They may have invested in things that they shouldn't, or the risk was too big to take, and that impacted people's lives. But overall, when you take these very large organizations, they created businesses in the past 20 years, some a bit older than that, some a bit newer than that, that today employ tens of thousands of people because of all those initiatives. And we need to remember that, yes, we lost 1,000 people in a company, but they created 50,000 jobs
Mhm.
with the same
I think
management.
it's an important perspective to take, is that even from like what I said earlier, right? You know, people have been irresponsible in terms of, I got lots of money to burn, I'm going to create lots of jobs, right? On one end, it is irresponsible because it's actually irresponsible for the business itself, right? That's why when I was talking about irresponsibility, it's irresponsibility for the business, because what normally happens is that these kind of unbounded expenditure and unbounded growth without any real focus or purpose ends up killing the business, right? And we've seen it ourselves in our own
Yeah.
lives, like a few people doing that. But yes, you can take that other perspective, is that even through their responsibilities, right, irresponsibilities, if you just purely look at from a circulation of money going from corporate hands into the hands of the people and into their lives,
Jobs that didn't exist a
yeah,
few years ago.
so everything has that dual thing, you know. You have to kind of, yeah, totally, you can't just look at it from one point of view. But when I was saying actually irresponsible, I wasn't talking about irresponsible from a social responsibility perspective.
No,
I was
I
talking about
understood.
irresponsible from a business perspective.
Yeah. So no, no, yeah. Because like if you take the jobs in IT, a lot of the jobs in IT, they didn't exist 20 years ago. There are many people today that work in IT, not only developers, but everyone in the IT industry working for IT companies. Those jobs didn't even exist. Those titles didn't exist. And for example, we are a tiny, well, compared to Microsoft and Google, right? So we are a much smaller organization. We are just over 200 people now. So, for example, like this is quite cool to share with people because, like, this maybe, I hope that can be also a good message for people that unfortunately were made redundant in this crisis. But like, I was made redundant before in 2009 in the crisis, and this creates also opportunities. And for example, a lot of businesses, mainly in IT, the initial investment to start an IT business can be quite small depending on which business you are talking about. If you are going to a product, it will be far bigger investment. A service business is much cheaper to start. Codurance started from Starbucks. So our initial investment was £2,000 to buy a laptop to one guy. So that is, I believe that, for example, for the amount of talented people that were unfortunately made redundant for the big techs and stuff, there is a huge opportunity because there's a lot of talented people that were made redundant for one reason or another. Because again, I was made redundant from a company. It was not my fault. They had to cut costs and I was on the bench. I was not in a project. Other people that I like to think that maybe I was a little bit potentially, at least from my perspective of the world, maybe a little bit better than them. But they were bringing money to the company. At that point, they had to cut the people that were not bringing money to the company, and I was not in a project. So I was made redundant. And I never blamed that company. In fact, I came back and worked for them again a few years later because I understood that it was not their choice to make me redundant. So no one, like, I don't know what kind of person you would need to say, look, I want to start firing a bunch of people. No one wants to do with their business. Right?
One thing, it was their choice. It was just not a personal thing, right? Like
well, the
decision, the
There's
decision.
always a choice.
No, there's always a
Exactly.
choice, but it's not as simple. But it's not as simple. I think that the not being personable is very important because when you go through layoffs, you cannot just, at least in the UK, because I went through that process myself, they cannot just say you and you are all out and you all have the same titles. In order to start making people redundant, at least in the UK, they need to have a very well-defined criteria. Because like if they have 10 people, all, let's say, software developers, and they need to, let's say, get rid of 5 for financial reasons, they cannot just point their fingers at random 5 and fire them. There is a procedure to do that. So I was caught in that process. So but what I'm trying to say is that there are also opportunities for people to start new business, to start new initiatives, to maybe like look for something new or even
to
start
find a different place as well, because sometimes you're just
exactly.
comfortable where you are, and then when
Because
things
sometimes
when something shakes the tree, like, oh, okay, so
I think Jaman there makes a very good point. He says that bad managers put numbers over people. So in these massive layoffs that occurred, where they're trying to balance the books for their personal gain instead of taking care of people. Now I think it's a very good point, and it goes back to full circle to the little story that you mentioned, Jose. Is that, and in fact, I'm reading a book at the moment called "Built" by Tony Fadell, who's the who kind of ran iPod division for Apple and founder for Nest. And it's a really good book. And this is the same thing that he talks about. Businesses will need to make layoffs for business reasons. It's how you do it that's important, right? And he talks about exactly this kind of thing. So these are people at the end of the day, right? And you need to treat them with respect. And if you can, you need to provide them with opportunities. So this company that is hired a company in order to find jobs for the people that they are laying off, that's the, if you have to do it, and the choice that you made, that's the way to do it. Is that helping people find new jobs, find new careers, understanding their own personal where they are as well, so that you can help them and create those kind of opportunities. It's that callousness that actually rakes, because and this is, I'm sorry to say, but very common in like a lot of American businesses, where they get a text message and the doors are locked, and or get
you find out you've
escorted
been
from
fired because
exactly, because
your car doesn't work. No, you try to get into the
yeah.
office.
Although
this is the
I'd say
thing.
that Tony Fadell was also running an American business, and he's talking about respect. So generalizing, but yes, you
Yeah.
see it a lot of that, right?
Because this is the thing. Thanks, Jennifer. So but like this is a thing that is very important, I think, because I went through the process myself. So this is the company. If you want to know which company, you can. I'm sure that you can go through my LinkedIn profile and figure out which one it is, because there was just one company that I left and came back. Yeah. So the but I felt respected. It's a company that I really wanted to work for. So when I was looking for a job, I had just two companies in mind. I applied for both and I got a job in there. That's where I met Mesh and I met Akbar, that also works for us today. And it's a company that I loved. I really wanted to be there and I did my best to work with that company. And unfortunately, we went through the credit crunch and they had to make me redundant. And I felt, of course, I was hurt. But the way that they did, I felt that they respected me. They sat down with me. They explained the process to all of us. They gave us opportunities and they were fighting hard to find us a project until the last moment. And they cleared that. They said, look, this is what we're trying to do. And the last two people to be made redundant, it was, well, me and another guy. And there was just one job, one position with a client that they found. And I lost it in there because the guy was a principal. I was more junior than him. So they took their best person to look after that client, which is also a friend of mine. So when I was made redundant in that company, I felt respected. So because I understood their point, of course it sucked for me. And then what I did at the time, fortunately, I had some reserves myself, because this is another thing that I would also recommend people, like if you are in IT, like try to make sure that you run your personal lives as you run a business. You need to have a reserve. You cannot just start. Knowing people in IT, we have, hopefully you be able to save some money. But and then I tried a business. So when I was made redundant, in fact, unfortunately Jennifer, I think she left, but I actually came back as a contractor for a period of time where I worked with Mesh again. Because they needed, at some point they found more work and they hired some of us back. But then I was off, and I tried my first startup, which I failed miserably. But then when after a year, and then I had to look for a job again. I called Mesh. Mesh was still working for the same company. Say, hey, I need a job. And Mesh said, that was a Friday. I will never forget that, Mesh. I don't know if you remember. But then Mesh was helping me with my first attempt to a business. And I called him on a Friday and said, look, I need to go back to work and earn some money. My business thing didn't work. And then he said, okay, so let me speak here. Don't do anything. Don't speak to anyone. Wait for me. So that was a Friday. He called me back later on the same day. And he said, like, you can start on Monday. And I joined the same company that made me redundant 1 year later. So, but there was a mutual respect in how they treated me. And I felt respected to the point that I could have chosen at that time to go somewhere else. It's not that I did not have options. I just called my friends first. And I wanted to go back to where I was. And I did. And I spent another 2 years in there. So what I'm saying is that yes, you might blame the company or the stuff, but there is, I think, that the way that things are done, I would feel potentially disrespected if I just receive like a very impersonal message and say, hey, by the way, your login was canceled and your accounts were canceled, and you will speak to someone from
Someone will
HR will
escort
contact
you.
you
Someone
later
will escort you
to
to
sort out
your.
your, yeah, exactly, the
Yeah.
details.
No, no,
That would,
that's a very
yeah.
good point, because there are many tools that a business has before doing layoffs. No, in Spain, eres, ERTES, that all this thing is part of that. No, uh, so if you're not going to find them, there are other ways of dealing with that as a business. But again, it's also a choice, no, on for people whether they want to get their pay reduced or not, and so on. It's kind of like then you decide what you want to do. But I remember a few years back I went to one of these agile conferences here in Spain, and I don't know if you know Grupo Mondragon in Spain.
Which one? Sorry, say it again.
Mondragon.
No.
So these guys are una cooperativa, no? Like a
Yeah. A co-op.
cooperative
Yeah.
or co-op,
Cooperative, yeah.
yeah. But they basically run a bunch of businesses, and they do it. They have kind of a system where they decisions like this they bring to the people. Basically, these are the options that we have. We don't have enough money to do XYZ. We would need to, cut spending in X amount. This is how we're proposing to do this. What do you think? Are you okay with that? Would you like to, are you okay with taking a pay cut, et cetera, et cetera? And they do this. I wouldn't say it's like super democratic, although it's very democratic in the sense that people are involved in the decisions and so on. But he was explaining the process, and a lot of the times they manage to get businesses, turn around those businesses and make them thrive because of how they go about facing those situations, right? And I think that's quite important. No, a lot of the times those decisions are made. I wouldn't say in isolation, but without involving people, especially when it's something massive. No, in that sense.
Yeah.
So definitely the how is very important. And
Yeah.
again, for me, this example was quite the story that I mentioned at the beginning
Hmm.
is completely new. No, like
Yeah.
I'd never seen a company do that, basically.
Yeah.
So it surprised me positively.
Yeah. And then for me, like for people watching this episode, so it's always important. I think that just was just exchanging a message now, just now with Helder. So first of all, you as a professional, as an individual, you never know what's going to happen with the company that you work for, right? So and this is valid for everyone, including the owners of that company, right? For any professional. So nurture your professional network. Make sure that you do a good job for whoever you work with, right? So be a good professional, do your job well, keep those connections, because we never know what's going to happen next. One day everything is cool, next day is not. And it's always quite how can I say, it gives you a lot of not confidence is not the word that I'm looking for, but for example, it makes it much easier for me knowing that I had friends, knowing that I worked with places that I could either back to the companies that I worked for or people that I worked with that back then were now working with other companies, but having that confidence that I could pick up the phone and call a few people. So I mean, it's that hopefully, like for example, if I lower my expectations, I would get a job easily. This is very important. So as an individual, this is I think that everyone should do. Be a good
Gives you peace of mind. It would also give you peace of mind because of the security that people think they have with a job is, you know, it's an ideal.
the security that you
You
have
think
with you
it's
as
a
a
good
good
story and
professional,
it
right?
holds for many
Exactly.
cases, but it's not necessarily
Yeah.
true 100%.
This
Right?
this could be another fireside chat. Is like, the benefits of building your personal networks.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
could be a quite cool
Yeah.
one, actually.
How and why?
Yeah.
And with that in mind, I think we're on the 8 minute mark, past the hour. So somebody wants to bring in a new topic, or should we start closing?
I think we
Any
should
final
start
words?
close.
Any final words to close this episode?
Well, so I think that this is the last thing that we mentioned is probably how I would like to end. So make sure that you keep your connections, build good relationship with people, be as best as you can be as a professional, and then hopefully, like for example, when unfortunate things out of your control happen, and again, don't think that companies are The vast majority of the companies are doing that on purpose because it's detrimental to any company to go through that process. No one in their right mindset say, hey, I'm going to start firing people from my company, right? So that's not how you run a business. So there are things that might not be within your control, but what is in your control is be as good as you can be nice to people, nurture a good professional network, and then you will probably be less impacted when something like that happens. Or you'll be able to recover very quickly, let's say.
Okay.
Yeah.
You want
From
to go, Mash?
yeah, from my point of view, I think from businesses, you know, overextending is easily done, and it's easy to kind of look at it in hindsight and say you overextended. But still, managers, is their responsibility, is their burden to carry. And so always be careful on when you have a lot of money to burn, that, you know, are you just burning money, and that actually can have a detrimental impact in your business. But I think the more important part is that when you do have to make layoffs, and for business leaders, this happens, and it will, then that you treat people as humans, and you know, you are respectful, and you help them in any way that you can, so that they move on to their, you know, their next opportunity in the easiest possible way, and that they leave your company with a good taste, and with and feeling like, as Sandro was saying, that they've been respected, and that, you know, if you ever need them, and you know, or they need you, that they feel like that they can come back as well, and that actually creates a more sustainable business. You can't avoid layoffs, but it is, you have the option on how best to do it.
Well, I second both final thoughts, right? And I guess I'll just throw in, if you look up for the CAS conference in Spain, if you speak Spanish, by the way, a talk by Coldo Sarachaga, who's part of the Mondragon group, and where he explains a lot of how they basically run their companies in a way that it's more humane as well, and all this stuff. I think that would be an interesting insight. Now, if you're not familiar with how they do these things, because it gives you, as we were saying, there's always options. No, how you choose to do things and how you treat people is very important. So yeah, good to understand what those options are as well, and what can be done. So yeah, so I'll probably put the link somewhere later on. Okay, so this is the end for today's session. If you stay with us all this time and you're new and you liked what we discussed, like, subscribe, hit the notification button so that you get notified when we're starting other streams. We normally do this on Tuesdays around the same time, so you're more than welcome to join and participate in the conversation. It always makes it great. It enriches us very much, like it did today. So thank you for that. Thank you everyone who participated, and see you again on the next one.
Thank you all.
Thank you.